All right, Alexander. So let's talk about what's going on in Canada. And the big news from the weekend is that the Ottawa Mayor has declared a state of emergency amid trucker convoy occupation. You're hearing that word used a lot now in the mainstream media and among neoliberal politicians. The occupation now, and you're even hearing some of the supposedly counter protesters. I'm not quite sure if they're real counter protesters, if they've been placed. I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of both. But you're hearing counter protesters now also say the word occupation. So they're really pushing this word out there as kind of framing the narrative in order for them to declare a state of emergency, which will then pave the way for what? Trudeau has ruled out any military intervention as of yet. But you also had the Ottawa City Council calling these people terrorists, calling them mercenaries. So I don't know. Are they going to start with threatening them and trying to demonize them at first, but also using these words in order to keep the door open for some potential police or possible military intervention? I mean, where are they taking this?
Well, that's exactly where they're taking it. I mean, can I make a suggestion? Why not try an alternative approach? Why not talk to these people? I mean, that might be before you start getting into this kind of hysteria. Why not actually call a meeting, bring these people, their leaders in, have a discussion with them, find out what exactly it is they want, see whether or not you can reach an acceptable compromise or have proper discussion with them, and then move forward to see whether or not you can stabilize the situation. If the situation even needs stabilizing that way, why not do that instead of starting to talk about occupations, about all of these other things that we're hearing? I mean, it seems to me that is the democratic way. It seems to me that is the way that has always been used historically in Western countries. We talk about political leaders in other countries. I remember there were cases I remember reading. I mean, I don't remember him, but I remember reading once upon a time how JFK used to speak to people who led unions and things of this kind in industrial disputes, and where there were all kinds of problems at that time. So, as I said, why not before we start talking about police action, before we start organising counter-protests, before making threats, and it seems to me that what you're talking about are implied threats, which could translate into express threats, explicit threats, which could translate into actual physical action. Rather than calling them names, rather than making threats, rather than doing all of these sort of things, why not talk to people who are Canadian citizens, playing a vital role in the Canadian economy, make it clear that you respect what they do, by which I mean, the kind of livelihoods and work that they do, and that you respect that. You might disagree with them, but perhaps you can find some kind of way forward, or alternatively, perhaps you might be able to persuade them to either come to your view or to moderate their protests and to try to pursue them in some other way, if you find this presence in Ottawa so inconvenient. I mean, that seems to me the first obvious thing for a government, a democratic government, a properly elected government, a government that represents all of the people of Canada to actually do. Instead, what we see is we now hear all this talk about, I mean, they've been all called all sorts of incredible names. The R word has been used. The W word has been used. I have to be careful what I say. It then turned out that many of them were Sikhs. So that all sort of collapsed in ignominy, but then there's still talk, that they're, guided here by the Russians. I mean, you hear all of this absurdities, and we now talk about occupations like there was some sort of invading army. These are Canadian citizens protesting. I mean, and it's, invading army, and we now have counter-protests, we have all this abuse hurled at all of these people, and now, as I said, we're building up towards the next stage, which is, as I said, in my opinion, the kind of comments that you were reporting. They are clearly paving the way for some kind of action to be taken, forcible action to be taken against these people. Shall I say police action, which could involve a great deal of violence, because, police, if you unleash the riot police on people like this, that can trigger all kinds of violence. The riot police are never, the easiest people to deal with. And of course, if that doesn't work, well, given that you're talking about occupations, given that you're talking about those sort of things, well, I have to say, given the hysteria around here, I would have thought the possibility of the military being used is starting to become very real. I know it's been denied. I know Trudeau has said that he's not going to do it. I suspect the military themselves will not be happy to be put in that kind of situation. But if you talk about this whole affair in this kind of apocalyptic language, then, of course, it becomes easy to translate that language into that kind of forceful action. And you could actually start to see troops deployed. A more divisive, explosive response, I can barely imagine. And if you really want to create divisions within Canada and split opinion in Canada and create a domestic crisis in Canada, well, the Trudeau government, the Ottawa city government, the people who are busy on the Twitter sphere bombarding these people with abuse and insults, well, they're going about it in the right way.
Yeah, so I was watching Viva Frei live streaming from what's going on in Ottawa, and he actually approached the counter protesters. And I don't want to say that it was insignificant. Like, they didn't seem to be a lot of people. There didn't seem to be no people either. It seemed kind of medium as far as the turnout went. I mean, I'm not there, so I all I could judge was from what I was seeing via his camera and his documenting it. But you heard a lot of the counter protesters that he would interview that actually would decide to talk to him, because a lot of people would not want to talk to him. But those that did, there were some logical people that said, it's an inconvenience having them in our city. I can't move around. I can't do my daily stuff. That part I could understand. There were a lot of people that were also saying this was some sort of occupation. I mean, they were implying that occupation word, and how come they just don't get the jab and this can all end and all this stuff. That made me a little suspicious as to who those people were. I was kind of thinking maybe they're planted there, maybe they're not. I don't know. The whole capital argument that I'm living in the capital city and this is an inconvenience. I can understand that, but I will say if you live in a capital city, you should be prepared for stuff like that. I mean, I can tell you just from, my living in Greece, when the Greeks would go out and protest back in the day, they would protest about just about anything. Like say 5 years ago, they would protest about anything pretty much every week, and the city would shut down. I mean, it was a pain in the ass at times, but you live in a capital city, that's what it's like. The capital city is where the parliament's located. It's where the government is making those decisions. You have to go somewhere. You can't go to their homes. And obviously, that's wrong. So you're going to go to the parliament. You're going to go to where the decisions are made, and you're going to protest. To me, that argument is, it doesn't carry any weight, because when you're living in a capital, you understand that this is, just comes with the location. This is where people are going to go, and they're going to voice their grievances with the government. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. As far as what you said about how come the government just doesn't talk to these people, maybe the government can't talk to these people, and I'll put a few things towards you. And once again, this is just, my thinking about it. I'm not saying I know anything or I don't know anything. Maybe Trudeau can't talk to them because at the end of the day, Trudeau doesn't really have the authority to speak with them. In other words, there are other forces at work and other world leaders who have expressed their opinion to Trudeau, saying, if you dare talk to them, then we run the risk of having the same thing happen here. Don't give an inch to them, because this may spread to our country as well, Or maybe there's the Schwabs of the world who are telling Trudeau, don't you dare speak with them. That's the first thing I'm thinking about. He can't talk to them, Alexander, because you can't. There is no solution here. Because what are the truckers asking for? They're asking for not only no jabs and no mandates. From what I understand, they don't want any of the digital IDs and stuff like that either. And here's the problem that I see: if the powers that be had a way to justify people having a digital ID without the jab, then I truly believe that Trudeau and the powers that be would speak with the truckers and they would say, okay, fine, no mandates, no jab, but we need the digital ID because of climate change or because of X, Y, and Z. Do you understand what I'm saying? But now they don't have a way to justify a digital ID without the jab and without the mandates. So if Trudeau went and spoke to the truckers, he has nothing to negotiate with, because what Trudeau would say is, well, if I get rid of the mandates and I get rid of the jab requirements, well, then I have to get rid of the digital ID. And at the end of the day, it's the digital ID that the government wants. And the truckers are saying, well, you have to get rid of all of it. And they've said it. You have to get rid of all of it because why would I, want to show a digital ID as I cross the borders if you're going to get rid of the jab mandates and all of these things? There's no reason to have the digital ID either. There's no reason to track us in that way either. So, it seems that the government doesn't really have anything to negotiate, because at the end of the day, they want that digital ID. That's their end goal. But they can't give up the digital ID. They can't keep the digital ID and give up the other stuff because it doesn't make any sense. I mean,
yes.
Did you see what I'm saying? If they had like climate change and they said, the digital ID is not only about jabs, it's also about climate change and, I don't know, a social credit score. So, we're going to keep digital ID, but you can get rid of everything else. But they can't do that.
Well, can I just say? I mean, I take everything that you've just said on board, and I understand completely where you're coming from. But can I make a point? What you are essentially saying is that the government. It's not that the government can't talk to these people; it won't talk to these people because if it were to talk to these people, it would have to defend policies that it doesn't really want to defend. Because, if I may say so straightforwardly, they are dubious policies. Now, first of all, let's talk about the compulsory jab. There are all sorts of legal authorities and precedents about this, which have stretched back a long way about the fact that you shouldn't be able to compel people to take on medications that they are not happy with, or that they don't want to have. I mean, there is a significant body of law there. Anyway, that's one thing I wanted to say. But the other thing about, all these digital IDs, all this sort of control, which, as you correctly say, is going to be there until apparently the end of time, regardless of what happens with the pandemic and everything else. Well, what you're saying to me is that this is an authoritarian policy that is being imposed on the Canadian people, and therefore, because it is authoritarian, the government isn't able to discuss it with these people because, of course, that contradicts the authoritarian direction in which the government is going. And that, of course, is exactly consistent with all of these threats, all this abuse, all of this talk about the police being drawn in, the fact that a state of emergency has been declared, the rumblings about using the army, which are being denied, but the very fact that they're being talked about is a sign that is on the agenda for some people. All of that, as I said, points to the reality of a deeply authoritarian government seeking authoritarian responses. The way to do it, the classical way to handle this kind of thing in a democracy is to say, look, we've heard what you people have to say. We understand that you have particular feelings. We understand that there are concerns that you have about these policies. At the same time, you're causing enormous inconvenience to people in Ottawa. Why don't you disperse? Put together a delegation. We can meet with you. We can meet your delegation. We can have discussions. We can have talks. We can explain our policy to you. We can explain why it works. We can look for ways that, will at least satisfy you in some respects, perhaps not in all respects, but, we are Canadians. All of us are Canadians. We're working together. They won't do that. They won't do that because for them, it's all or nothing. It's all about achieving control. And of course, that is the slide towards authoritarianism, and it is the slide towards using police action and calling out the army if it ever comes to that. So I find this, a very deeply disturbing affair, and it is going to radicalize opinion in Canada. If you start unleashing the riot police on people in this way, if you start unleashing the army, God help us, on people in this way, then, as I said, you're in a very, very dangerous situation indeed.
Okay, so this is what Ottawa City Council member Diane Deans said during a 2-hour-long virtual discussion. Quote, "We are on day 8 of this occupation. Our city is under siege. What we're seeing is bigger than just a city of Ottawa problem. This is a nationwide insurrection. This is madness. We need a concrete plan to put an end to this." That is the Ottawa City Council member. Notice the words occupation, nationwide insurrection, and madness. The European Union, Alexander, said that they have a plan to keep the digital IDs in place, even though the mandates and the jabs and all that stuff has pretty much collapsed. I'm paraphrasing that part. Even though all the other stuff is either decreasing or has collapsed or has been withdrawn in many countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, even though all that stuff has gone away, the European Union said that they would like to keep the digital IDs in place for 1 more year. They didn't justify what the purpose is, because when you decouple the ID from the mandates, you're kind of left, asking, well, why do I need the ID then if all the mandates and all that stuff has gone away? What's the purpose of the ID? It seems that the European Union is just saying, give us some time to find a purpose.
Well, exactly.
What's happening in Canada is that it seems that the truckers and the Canadians have called Trudeau's bluff. I mean, they've called his bluff, and they've said, okay, Mr. Trudeau and the government of Canada, we don't want IDs. We don't want mandates. We don't want the jabs, and we don't want IDs. And we want all of this to go away. And the government is left saying, you know what, we can give away IDs. I mean, we can give away jabs. We can do away with mandates, but this ID thing, we kind of need it, and you're not giving us time to figure out how to justify this to you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, can I say I agree with that? But before we proceed there on those points, I mean, this language is ludicrous. Ottawa under siege, occupation, insurrection. I mean, all this military language. As I said, you from the way we're talking, people are talking about this. It sounds almost like a conquering army has arrived in Ottawa, encircled it, and it's attempting to do something. There's been virtually no actual physical violence at all. There's been no storming of buildings. There's been no action of that nature. There is, people are illegally occupying a piece of real estate. They're not occupying Ottawa. I mean, that is ludicrously overwrought language. And as you absolutely rightly said in your comments a few moments ago, well, you live in a capital city. Protests happen in capitals. They happen in every kind of capital, in any kind of democracy. And protests are orderly. Protests are sometimes lawful. There are issues about the legalities of some of the actions that these people are taking. But the fact is, this is overall an orderly protest. It's sometimes a bit raucous. There's a bit of, honking of things. But, people do feel strongly about this. Talk about uprisings and sieges is ludicrous. These people are not there to overthrow the political system of Canada. This isn't a nationwide insurrection. It might be a nationwide protest, but let's not talk about insurrection. What that kind of language tells me is one of two things. Well, two things. Firstly, again, how all or nothing, the mindset of the Liberals in Canada is, how you're either with us or against us. And if you're against us, then you must be up to some, utterly nefarious plan. And so that tells you how authoritarian they are. But it also tells you how ultimately insecure they are. Because, if you can't handle a protest like this, if you can't absorb the fact that people sometimes in democracies protest because they feel strongly about something, well, frankly, that tells me that you are extremely unsure of what you're doing, and you sense that the people of Canada perhaps aren't really supporting what you're doing, and that perhaps if you're so insecure about the fact that you're doing, what you are, rather than try and impose it, perhaps the time has come to retreat, or perhaps even to, dare I say it, call an election and find out what the people of Canada really think. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Language like insurrection, occupation, siege, completely inappropriate in these sort of contexts, incredibly inflammatory, incredibly dangerous, and it creates the real possibility of things escalating out of control. But as to the other comments you made, the other points you made, yes, obviously, the EU keeping digital IDs for a whole year after the problem, the ostensible problem that caused their introduction, the pandemic has abated. Well, when they talk about that, well, that means essentially digital IDs forever, because the whole point is that then it ceases to be an emergency measure to deal with an emergency, because the emergency has gone. And as you rightly say, you're looking for reasons to keep them, and you're going to keep them because that's clearly what you want to do. You want to normalize the fact that people have them, and then, of course, you'll be able to retain them and retain them indefinitely. Nothing that is temporary in that way remains temporary. It becomes permanent. And, of course, that's the case in the European Union. Obviously, it's the case in Canada too. People are sensing it, people feel it, and that's why you have this protest. That's why you have this protest wave across Canada. And if you want to radicalize people, if you want to make people angry and upset, well, that's what they're going to do if they continue to talk in this extraordinary way. But you're absolutely right. If the emergency has gone, if the linkage to the mandates has ended because you're not pursuing mandates, why pursue digital IDs? It's because ultimately what you really want are digital IDs. That's what you've been agitating for all along, and that's what you want to get, and that's what you want to impose upon people, despite the very real human rights implications of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly. So just to close out this video, I was thinking a lot about the truckers in comparison to NATO and Russia. And what do I mean by that? I mean that here you have, with NATO and Russia, you have the discussion that is, a country can choose to go to NATO if they want, to enter NATO if they want. That's their sovereign right. And so here you have this big, massive force, NATO, expanding a little bit. And Russia says, over the years and over the decades, Russia says, okay, nothing we can do about it now. They expand a little more. Russia says, well, we've gotten a little stronger. We've got a little more confidence, but we still can't do anything about it. And they expand a little more. And Russia says, well, this is getting dangerous. It's impeding on our well-being, but we're still not confident enough to do anything about it and take action. so we're going to let it go. Finally, they get to a point, NATO, where they expand a little too far, while at the same time, Russia has now gained strength and gained enough confidence to say, red line, stop, enough. And Russia says, yes, we understand that a country has the sovereign right to enter into whatever alliances it wants to. But isn't there a point where that country says, while Ukraine in this instance, while Ukraine has the right to enter an alliance, this also impedes on our security and our well-being. Yeah. So, while this country has a sovereign right to join an alliance, we also have a right to say, no, this is detrimental to our health and our well-being and our security. So we're saying no. The truckers is kind of the same parallel, is it not? Here you have the government over the past 2 years, this big, immovable, huge, massive force, putting a restriction here, a lockdown there, and the people say, okay, we'll accept this. Another lockdown, another restriction. The people say, well, we really can't do anything, or we're not confident enough to do anything, or we're not sure enough to do anything, so we'll let the government get a little more, put some more restrictions and move a little further in their authority. The government inches a little closer onto the people's rights. They take away people's rights. They impose more lockdowns, more mandates, more digital IDs. Finally, they reach a point where they take things a little too far. And here you have the truckers who have finally gained enough confidence, gained enough strength, and they've said enough. Enough. We understand why you're doing this. We understand why you did it. At first, we played along. At first, we thought it was for the well-being of the country. But now it's impeding on our well-being, on our ability to make a living, on our health, and our human rights. And so we're putting a stop to it.
Yes.
Do you see the parallels there? It's
absolutely.
And once again, you have people saying, and you have people in Canada saying, well, what's the big deal? Just take a jab. It's no big deal. Just do it.
Yeah.
This is our right to tell you to stay at home. It's our right to say sit at home and don't partake in society because you're dangerous. That's what they're telling the truckers or the people that are protesting. Yes. Who are you to protest if you don't want to take the jab? Stay at home. NATO is saying Russia, well, who are you, Russia? If Ukraine wants to join NATO, well, they can join NATO. But you have very parallel situations there.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, to come back to your initial point, I mean, there's that famous expression, every action ultimately provokes a parallel and equal reaction. And to a great extent, that is what we're seeing. Now, with Russia and NATO, well, we've now reached that point where, as you rightly say, the Russians are able to react. But if we go back to Canada, focus on Canada specifically, this has been pushed too far. The crisis, the pandemic situation is abating. I've said this many times because, I mean, regardless of what you think of the current variant, I've said many times, this new variant was the point where people said, enough, we can't take any more. It's not achieving, the jab isn't achieving all the things that we were led to think it was achieving. And beyond that, the problem with the jab is that whatever issues you might have about the jab itself, and remember what I said previously, that there's case law, well-established case law, all over the West about not being forced to accept medical treatment against your choice. But, beyond that, there is the further issue that it appears to be leading, the jab appears to be leading to other things, to other things, digital IDs, all kinds of controls, which appear to be looking like they become permanent. And of course, what's happened is a large part of Canadian society, one particularly affected by this, have come and they've said, enough. And they said, stop. And the essence of democracy is that you're supposed, when you come up against a policy where a large part of your community are strongly opposed to it, a democracy involves discussion. It's the requirement to debate. And instead of having that discussion, talking about these things, coming to some sort of arrangement, saying, we've still got this emergency, for example, so we do still need, to do certain things, but you have our absolute promise, and we're going to enshrine it in legislation that when the thing is over, then all the other things that we're talking about, they might go, and in the meantime, we're going to see what we can do to address your grievances, and anyway, something of that nature. Have a proper discussion. What you have is exactly the same reaction that Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, said when the Russians say, well, look, this is now affecting our security. He comes along, says Russia has no right of veto, no right to have a say, no right to have an opinion about the matter. That's about NATO expansion. And it parallels exactly what Trudeau and some people are saying in Canada. These people have no right to an opinion. They have no right to a say. They just have to accept it. They may not like it. They just have to accept it. Now, that's not how democracies work. That's not how democratic governments have worked in the past. If you start to force this kind of thing on people in that kind of way, then, as you correctly said, it will provoke an opposite and equal reaction. And that's what we see.
That's not how national sovereignty works, and that's not how personal sovereignty works either.
Of course not. Of course not. Absolutely not. And I mean, imposing your ideas on people, be it on states, powerful states like Russia, powerful, sections of your society, because truckers, what they're doing at the moment is they're discovering their own power. It's not a good idea. It ultimately creates enormous conflict. And of course, let me repeat again, democracy is a political system based on consent. Consent requires discussion. It requires mutual respect. And there's none of that in evidence at the moment.
Yeah, and you just can't tell truckers, suck it up, do as we say, or lose your job, stay at home, and be outcast from societies. In much the same way that you just can't tell Russia, stay in your country, do as we say, we're going to move our missiles anywhere we want, and just suck it up. We don't care.
Absolutely. Well, I mean,
you just can't do these things.
That is completely unrealistic. That's the other thing. This is, which is, of course, the trap authoritarians always fall into. It's an unrealistic mindset anyway. The idea that you can impose ideas on people in that kind of fashion. But, you also need to take a step back and think about what it is that you're trying to impose. As you rightly said at the start, you could justify all sorts of things if you persuade enough people that there is an emergency. But once the emergency has either receded or is no longer believed in anymore, then trying to continue to do that is unrealistic, and it results in exactly the kind of thing that we're seeing now. And there's no uprising in Canada. There's no attempt to overthrow the political system. What is happening is that people are acting to achieve redress of grievances in a system where at a moment when the political system isn't functioning properly. If it were functioning properly, there would have been talks, and this situation could have been diffused, because these people, truckers, are reasonable people. They're giving up opportunities to work. They're probably losing money by what they're doing. Nobody wants to sit around in the freezing cold in a square. What drives them to do it is real feelings, real concerns. And as I said, the Canadian government should speak to these people and find a way through. Trudeau isn't going to do that, and I really worry very much about what's going to happen.
He can't. That's my feeling on it.
Well,
He's not going to do it because he can't.
Well,
he doesn't have the authority to do it. And if he were to do it, then it would destroy their whole plan, which is the digital ID.
Well,
he would have to get rid of everything.
Well, exactly.
And that would have a ripple effect across the world.
Exactly. So if he can't talk to the people of Canada to or at least a section of the people of Canada, and the people who are in Ottawa, in this part is true, reflect a feeling across Canada that is becoming increasingly widespread. Well, if they can't talk to their own people, well, that tells you where the real danger to democracy in Canada and elsewhere is coming from.
Yeah. Just on a final note, if people don't think or believe that other leaders in other countries aren't watching this closely and shaking in their boots, saying, if Trudeau folds on this and he gives the truckers exactly what they want, we're also screwed. Well, they are, and yes. they're also saying, Trudeau, do not walk this back, because if you walk this back, then we're going to have the same exact problem here. That's what Absolutely. All the leaders all across the world are saying that have imposed this type of tyranny. There are leaders that haven't imposed this type of tyranny that are saying, that's what you get, Trudeau, for acting like this.
Well, indeed, yes. As I said, the people are watching this. Obviously, they're watching this, and they're watching this extremely carefully. And as I said, there are legal resources. There are political recourses. It's perfectly legitimate, reasonable to say, as you correctly said at the start of the program. Yes, people are being inconvenienced, and some of the actions, occupying public squares, are illegal. You can point this out, and you can say, look, you're inconveniencing people. You're doing all kinds of things, but we do understand that you have these concerns. So put together a delegation, let's sit down and talk, and in the meantime, all of you can go to our homes and we can talk and find a way through and involve the political parties. That's how democracy, as I said, works. But they're not going to do that. They're taking these authoritarian responses, and we see how that's certainly around the world, people are watching.
All right, we'll leave it there, everybody. The Duran.locals.com, ODYSEE, BitChute, Rumble, and Super U, and go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.